In a world shaped by forgotten gods, fallen kingdoms, and echoes of ancient battles, every legend hides a deeper truth. What you are about to witness is not just history, but the untold story behind it. Welcome. Before the pyramids pierced the sky, before the kings wore crowns of gold, before the Nile became the spine of a civilization, there was only silence, a silence so vast that even the wind seemed afraid to disturb it. The land that would one day be called Egypt was at first only a stretch of endless desert, and a river that wandered through it like a patient, ancient serpent. The Nile flowed long before pharaohs, long before cities, long before stories were even carved in stone. It was the rhythm of a world still learning how to breathe. People did not yet know what greatness would rise here. They did not yet know that someday, in this place, humanity would build monuments so mighty that even millennia could not erase them. They did not know their names would echo across time, but everything has a beginning, even eternity. Tonight, as you listen, imagine the world thousands of years before the first pyramid stone was ever lifted. Imagine the warm air drifting over an untouched desert, the slow, steady whisper of the Nile as it fed its banks, and the people who gathered near its waters, trying to understand the mystery around them. This is where our story begins, in the quiet morning of a civilization that was still dreaming. Every year, like the heartbeat of the earth, the Nile would rise. Its waters spilled over the dry ground, leaving behind a blanket of rich, black soil. The Egyptians called this soil Kemet, the Black Land. It was this soil that transformed a land of sand into a land of life. The earliest Egyptians watched this miracle with awe. They didn't have science yet. They didn't have mathematics, calendars, or architecture. But they had the river, and the river taught them everything. When the Nile rose, they planted. When the Nile fell, they harvested. And slowly, they began to understand the rhythm of the world around them. Villages grew along the riverbanks. Families stayed instead of wandering. Slowly, carefully, they learned to work together, farming, fishing, weaving, shaping tools from stone and copper. Their homes were simple, made of mud and sun-dried brick. Their days were filled with labor, but also with a deep, quiet harmony. The first spark of Egyptian civilization began not with a king, not with a city, but with an understanding. Life comes from the river. And so, people followed it. As the Nile fed the land, the people began to imagine spirits in everything around them. They saw gods in the sun that warmed them. They saw gods in the animals that lived beside them. They saw gods in the river that sustained them. In time, these ideas took form, slowly, softly, like the sunrise over the desert. They believed the Nile was guided by a divine force. They believed the sun was a powerful being who traveled across the sky each day. They believed the earth itself was alive. This early spiritual world was the foundation of everything the Egyptians later created. Before the pyramids were built as tombs, before priests filled temples with incense and chants, before gods like Ra, Osiris, and Isis were carved into stone, there were only ideas, soft, shapeless, drifting like desert sand. But these ideas mattered, because they planted the first seeds of the belief that would one day make Egypt build monuments not for men, but for eternity. As centuries passed, the small riverside villages grew into communities, then towns, then regions. Eventually, Egypt divided into two great lands: Upper Egypt in the south, narrow and fertile; Lower Egypt in the north, the wide delta spreading into the Mediterranean. These lands were different in climate, customs, and even their symbols. Upper Egypt was represented by the white crown. Lower Egypt carried the red crown. For hundreds of years, the two lands grew separately, unaware that one day they would unite under a single ruler, a pharaoh who would change everything. But for now, they remained two worlds connected only by the endless Nile. Life was simple, slow, and rhythmic. People hunted along the marshes, tended cattle near the riverbanks, and shaped clay into jars. They carved small figurines of gods. They buried their dead in shallow graves, wrapped in simple cloth, believing that life continued after death, not in a kingdom of heaven, but in the warm, gentle desert that surrounded them. This belief in an afterlife would one day lead to pyramids. But for now, it was only a whisper. Around 3300 BCE, something changed. Towns near the Nile began competing with one another for land, for resources, for control of the river. Leaders became stronger. Clans united under chiefs, and chiefs became kings. These early kings did not yet build pyramids, but they did make their mark in other ways. They built the first sacred tombs, long, flat structures called mastabas. They commanded armies made of farmers and hunters. They controlled trade routes across the desert, and they started the idea that a leader was not merely a man, but a chosen one, touched by the gods. This belief would grow over time, shaping a world where kings were not just rulers, but divine beings whose duty was to maintain harmony between the people, the land, and the gods. The idea of Ma'at, the Egyptian concept of balance and cosmic order, began here. It was the belief that everything, every river flood, every sunrise, every human action, had a place in the universe. If the king upheld balance, Egypt prospered. If he failed, chaos would rise. This belief was powerful. It turned kings into symbols, and symbols into legends. Over centuries, the kings of Upper and Lower Egypt grew stronger. Their influence expanded. Conflicts rose, trade and power shifted. Until finally, one figure emerged who changed the course of history forever. Narmer, also known as Menes. He united the two lands under a single crown, the double crown, combining red and white. With this act, Egypt became a nation, one kingdom, one people, one river. And with unity came stability. With stability came administration. With administration came architecture. And with architecture came ambition. The dream that would one day become the pyramids began the moment Egypt became whole. In the centuries after unification, Egypt's kings settled near Memphis, establishing a powerful center of rule. Here, they built large mastabas, the ancestors of pyramids. They organized labor forces, controlled agriculture, and developed advanced stoneworking techniques. Every year, their tombs grew larger, more complex, more symbolic, more ambitious. The belief in the afterlife became stronger. The idea of eternal kingship grew deeper, and the desire to build something that would last forever took root. The people did not yet know what they were preparing for, but history knew. The desert knew. The Nile knew. Egypt was moving towards something unprecedented, a structure so massive, so enduring, that the world would speak its name for thousands of years. The age of the pyramids was coming. But first, the world needed a visionary, a mind unlike any who had come before, a man who saw not a tomb, but eternity. And his name was Imhotep. As the desert wind drifted softly across the vast land of ancient Egypt, Life and death were never seen as opposites, but as two halves of the same eternal circle. To the people of this old kingdom, existence did not end when the heart stopped beating. It simply changed form. It slipped through another doorway, one built not of wood or stone, but of belief. For the Egyptians, a human being was made of several parts, each with its own purpose. This belief shaped not only their daily life, but also the architecture that would one day become the pyramids. At the center of this idea were three sacred elements: Ka, Ba, and Ak. Ka was the life force, the energy that animated the body, the spark that entered a person at birth. When someone died, the Ka didn't disappear. It continued to exist, but it needed a place to return to. A home. That home became the tomb. Ba was the personality, the identity, the part of a person that could travel freely. It was often depicted as a human-headed bird. At night, the Ba wandered the land, and at sunrise, it returned to the body. For this reason, tombs always had to be secure, solid enough to protect the body, yet spiritually open enough to let the Ba pass. And finally, Ak, the highest form, the union of Ka and Ba, the enlightened, eternal spirit. Something close to what the Egyptians believed could roam the stars. To protect all these forms, to ensure they could reunite and live forever, a chamber of absolute safety was needed. So strong that sandstorms, robbers, and even time itself could not destroy it. This is where the idea of the pyramid truly begins, in the need for an eternal home. Long before the smooth-sided pyramids appeared on the horizon, the earliest Egyptian rulers were buried in structures called mastabas, flat-roofed, rectangular tombs made from mud brick. They were low to the ground, almost humble compared to what would come later. But inside them lay something powerful, Egypt's growing conviction that its kings were not just leaders, but divine beings whose spirits were tied to the gods. As Egypt grew, so did this idea. A simple resting place was no longer enough. The tomb of a king needed to reflect his sacred status. It needed a form that could rise above the desert, reach toward the sky, and mirror the journey of the soul ascending to the heavens. The question was, how? During the reign of Pharaoh Djoser, a man emerged who would change everything. His name was Imhotep, a figure so brilliant that later generations worshipped him as a god. Imhotep was not only an architect, he was a scientist, a healer, a philosopher, a mind far ahead of his time. Looking at the old mastabas, he imagined something greater. What if a tomb could rise upward? What if it could be built not from mud brick, but from stone? Something the world had never attempted on such a scale. And so, Imhotep created a revolutionary design. A mastaba stacked upon another, and another, and another, reaching upward in giant steps. This became the Step Pyramid of Saqqara, the first large stone building in human history. It towered over the land, nearly 200 feet high, shining under the desert sun like a staircase for the king's soul to climb toward eternity. For the Egyptians, it was a revelation. Stone meant permanence, height meant closeness to the gods, and shape meant meaning. The pyramid form had begun. Many theories exist: mathematical, astronomical, symbolic. But to the Egyptians, the meaning was clear. They believed the world began with a sacred mound rising from the endless waters of chaos. This mound, called the Benben, was the first land, the birthplace of creation. The pyramid resembled this mound, a symbol of the world's origin, a promise of rebirth. Others believed the shape represented the sun's rays, a path for the pharaoh to ascend to the heavens, where he would join Ra, the sun god. And then there is the sky itself. The Egyptians looked upward and saw patterns. The stars of Orion, especially, held great meaning. They believed these stars were connected to Osiris, the god of the afterlife and rebirth. Aligning the tombs with Orion meant guiding the king's spirit home. So, the pyramid took shape not just as a building, but as a map of the cosmos, a divine machine meant to carry the ruler's soul beyond the stars. With Djoser's success, Egypt entered what historians call the Age of the Pyramids, a time when wealth, stability, and belief combined to produce some of the most extraordinary structures ever built. Kings wanted their tombs not just large, but eternal. They wanted their legacy carved into the desert itself. Each pharaoh sought something greater than the last. The step pyramid was only the beginning. Soon, architects experimented with shapes: the bent pyramid, the red pyramid, and, eventually, the legendary structures on the Giza Plateau. But that part of the story belongs to the next chapter. For now, imagine the desert at dusk, the sky turning violet, the stars beginning to appear one by one, and in the fading light, the first pyramids casting their silent shadows across the sand. Monuments built not for the living, but for eternity. The desert night had fully settled now. A soft breeze carried the whispers of the past, brushing across the sand dunes, as if the land itself remembered every footstep of the laborers, every prayer of the early priests, and every thought of the first kings. The step pyramid of Djoser had set a precedent. It had shown that stone could last for millennia, that ambition could rise above the mortal plane, and that architecture could touch the divine. But the Egyptians were not content with simply reaching a few steps into the sky. They dreamed of grandeur, of monuments that would endure through all time, their forms echoing the eternal rhythm of the cosmos. In this early period, the Egyptians refined the rituals that would accompany their rulers into the afterlife. The concept of mummification began as a practice to preserve the body, ensuring that the Ka and Ba could reunite. Herbs, oils, and resins were used, carefully wrapping the deceased in layers of linen, protecting them from decay. Offerings of bread, beer, and other daily necessities were left in tombs, along with small statues called shabtis. These figures were intended to serve the king in the afterlife, performing tasks on his behalf. Every detail mattered. Every grain of sand, every carved stone, every ritual chant was part of a system designed to maintain balance and harmony, both in life and in the eternal world beyond. These preparations were not merely superstition, they were acts of devotion. They represented the Egyptians' profound respect for the journey beyond, and their understanding that life and death were interconnected in ways that the living could influence. Following Djoser, architects continued to experiment. The bent pyramid of Sneferu demonstrated a trial in geometry, an evolution of design and engineering. Initially, the steep angle threatened collapse, prompting adjustments that eventually led to the Red Pyramid, Egypt's first true smooth-sided pyramid. Each stone laid was a step toward perfection, each angle calculated with care, not only for stability, but for cosmic alignment. The builders of these monuments were skilled laborers, not slaves as once believed. They worked in organized teams, guided by master craftsmen, and supported by a community that recognized the sacred importance of their labor. The sound of chisels on limestone, the rhythm of stone being transported along ramps, and the scent of resin and oils used in rituals created a living, breathing temple of human devotion. While the step pyramid marked the beginning, the plateau of Giza would later become the crown jewel of Egypt's architectural achievements. Here, the pyramids were not just tombs, they were symbols of power, divinity, and the eternal order of the cosmos. The layout of the three pyramids at Giza mirrored the stars of Orion's belt, ensuring that the king's soul could navigate the heavens after death. The surrounding temples and causeways facilitated rituals and ceremonies, maintaining the connection between the earthly and divine. Priests chanted prayers that resonated in the stone halls, and offerings were placed daily to honor both the gods and the departed pharaohs. Even in silence, the desert spoke. It reminded all who approached these structures of the enduring presence of the past, of civilizations that had mastered both the land and the heavens in their pursuit of eternity. As we close this chapter, imagine standing before the first pyramids in the cool night air. The stars twinkle above, mirrored in the perfectly aligned stones below. The wind whispers secrets of an ancient world where life, death, and eternity intertwined seamlessly. These structures were more than tombs. They were statements of belief, ambition, and cosmic understanding. They were a testament to the human desire to touch the divine, to leave a mark that time could not erase. And it all began with the Nile, the first kings, and the quiet desert where a civilization dared to dream forever. The first chapter of Egypt's pyramid story ends here, but the journey is far from over. The next pharaohs would take these lessons and reach even higher, shaping monuments that would awe the world for millennia.